some tips on how I was able to pay off $74,102 and some cents in student loans. I was able to pay off my debt in under 2 years' time. I believe it was about 21 months that I took to be able to pay off these student loans, which were private as well as some federal loans. So just a little background about how I was able to accumulate all these loans. I went to college out of state, and to get in the end I ended up graduating with a mining engineering degree. However, when I went to college, I knew I wanted to do engineering, and it took me a while to get into my major. I kind of played around with some other majors, but in the end I went with mining engineering, which I absolutely loved. And so, having gone to school where I was out of state, I was paying out of state tuition. However, when I got into the mining engineering program out there at the time, I don't believe they have it anymore, but at the time I was able to get into a certain program whereby if that particular program is not offered in your home state, you can be able to get in-state tuition. So later on, I was able to get in-state tuition as a mining engineering student at my university. And so when I went to college, growing up in a single mom home, the income was not able to get me whereby I can be able to just be able to pay for school by myself. And so I was able to I had to get a lot of student loans, and at the time I didn't really have an understanding that this was not free money. Unfortunately, I'm a Sierra Leonean American. I was the first in my family to directly go to a 4-year university right out of high school, and so my mom went to school back in Sierra Leone. And so we didn't really understand how this worked, and I didn't really read between the lines on a lot of things. I was not very aware about interest rates. I was just applying for things and knew that that would get me money to pay for school. I was able to get some scholarships, but not enough. And the thing is, books are so expensive nowadays that some of those scholarships were only really able to get me through for buying my textbooks and not really just paying for tuition and board and all these other things. So I got some scholarships. Got rejected for a lot of other scholarships that I applied for. So unfortunately, that was my only option, was to get student loans. So I applied for several loans, ignoring completely the interest rates, and also I got private and federal student loans. And so when I graduated from college, what I was doing was, there were times whereby I'd pay the minimum amount, and then there were also times where I was just kind of put in deferment or forbearance, and of course during this time, unfortunately, the interest rate kept building up, even though I was not actively paying, but the interest rate was just building up over time. So in the end, I ended up paying more money than what I even took out when I was in college. And so that was really a stressful time for me. And I hated the mental stress of that, because also I always hear these stories of people who spent 20 plus years paying off their student loans. And that just always gave me a lot of anxiety and fear that, oh my goodness, I'm really going to be stuck with these loans forever. How much am I going to really pay? And especially because at the time, even if I was paying off my loans, it would be the minimum amount that I was paying. And so that was not going to take me anywhere. And the interest kept building. There were so many times in those, honestly, when I was paying minimum amount, all I could touch was really the interest. I wasn't even touching the principal amount at all. And so those kinds of things were very discouraging for me. And I remember one day I was at work. I worked at a gold mine, and I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I don't remember how the conversation started, but I was talking with him, an older gentleman, and we're driving around and out in the field, and we're just kind of sharing. He was a mentor to me at my job, and I was sharing all these student loans that I have, and then he was just like, "Why don't you just pay it off? You make it good enough money right now. You're a single woman with no kids. It's like, why don't you just be intentional and pay it off? Because you've expressed how much this stresses you out that you're going to be stuck with these loans." And it's crazy because I just kind of had a light bulb moment. It's just like, well, yeah, why can't I just be intentional and just put as much as I can? And one of the things I really appreciated he did was just kind of he sat me down, and then he was just like, okay, so how much do you owe? And how much do you make and how much do you think you can be able to put towards this, be intentional about putting towards this monthly. And I think at the time the intention was to pay it off in about 4 or 5 years, which seemed so impossible. But the way how he broke down the numbers, and I'm an engineer, and so it became more practical for me to be able to get it done, because I was able to see that breakdown of the numbers that, you know what, I don't have to spend 20 plus years paying off my student loans. It's possible to get it done in under 10 years and even maybe in 5 years or less. And so I remember getting out of that time with him and calling the student loan borrowers and just saying, hey, I want to get out of the payment plan I'm in, because with that payment plan I was in, I think I was going to be stuck with loans for the next 20 some years. And I said, I want to get off it. What is the one that I can get on that can get me the quickest out of these loans and be debt free? And so I made those calls. So now, just having this background information, here's some practical tips I want to share with you in how you can be able to be debt free, whether it depends on your student loans. And these are also applicable for maybe credit card loans or whatever other loans you may have out there. And I have my computer next to me just as a nice guideline to kind of keep me on track and be able to share as much information. One of the first things I did was to consolidate all my loans. Like I said, I had private as well as federal. And so with the federal loans, I was able to consolidate all of them. And I don't think I was able to consolidate private ones because they wouldn't do that. However, if it's possible for you to consolidate your private loans, please be sure to do that. But I was able to consolidate my loans and just have one lump sum rather than having, oh, I owe this borrower this amount and the other borrower. Just consolidate them as much as you can, and that just kind of makes you see a full figure. You have a great idea of how much you truly owe. Another thing too that I did was I would recommend is to pay off the high interest rate loans. And so my private, of course, were the higher interest rate loans. And so I was intentional about getting rid of those ones first. And so I'd recommend doing that. One of the key things I did, and I try to maintain that even after I had paid off my loans, was to create a very detailed budget, expenses tracker, whatever you want to call it. And I created a very detailed sheet just showing all the student loans I owe, and also showing what my expenses were, my monthly expenses. And for me, I did it on Excel spreadsheet. And I know there are so many amazing apps out there that you can be able to get this done. But to me, I just created this nice Excel spreadsheet whereby I detailed out my student loans, how much I owe, and also what are my monthly expenses, thinking about rent and food and bills and utilities and all that. I wrote down everything, wherever I know my money usually goes to during the month. I put all of that in that spreadsheet, and that was able to help me just see what my expenses look like on a monthly basis, so I can be able to budget and spend accordingly, honestly. And so I highly recommend doing that. Another tip I would say would be to sign up for auto pay, because I remember as I was intentional about becoming debt free, I remember reading a few articles whereby they mentioned having auto pay, because after a period of time, some of these borrowers can actually decrease your interest rates. And that actually happened for my federal student loans, whereby I had auto pay. And so after about a few months or so, I remember that my interest rate decreased. So that's a key thing I would highly recommend that you should do. Also, I'd say to make, so for instance, if you want to be putting $3,000 towards your student loans monthly, I'd recommend making 2 payments rather than one. Rather than putting the $3,000 on the 15th or the 30th of the month, I'd say on the 15th of the month, put $1,500, and then on the 30th of the month, put $1,500. So it's the same amount you'd have paid that month. However, you made 2 payments, because that also will help your credit score as well. As you're getting out of debt, also you want to build your credit score. So that's an important thing that I remember reading. So I had my allocated amount that I wanted to put towards my loans every month. However, I would split that payment and do some, I believe it was on the 15th I had it set up for, as well as on the 30th. So it looked like you were putting more towards it, even though it's the same amount that you would have just done for once a month. And so that's a key thing I remember was helpful for me as well. And with respect to having to pay off so much or putting some large amounts towards your loans, I would say to cut down some of your expenses. It's possible to live below your means. For instance, just some examples you can do is unsubscribe from whatever um, thick payments you make during the month. You know, we have all these different subscriptions out there. We have so many streaming services. Do you really need all those five streaming services? So think about it. That was something I did as I created my detailed spreadsheet. I looked at, okay, where's my money going every month? Do I really need that streaming service? Do I really use it? Do I even have time to watch it? So be honest with yourself. Where all these little money's going to? Because you may say, oh, I only pay $12 a month for that. But that $12 really adds up if you calculate it for the year time. And so really cut back on some of these expenses that you use monthly. And another thing too I did, which may be silly and it may seem counterproductive, was I remember around that time too, I was just kind of looking at ways to be saving. And as crazy as it may be, because I'm trying to get off, debt, but also I want to save, was I got a cashback credit card. And hear me out, because that sounds silly. Why would you get a credit card when you're trying to get out of debt? What I did was, it was a cashback credit card whereby whenever I'd use that credit card, I'll get some kind of cash back. And with that, what was helpful is that the cashback that I would get, just the little amount that I would save was amazing, because it just goes towards, and I'll actually use that cashback money to pay again towards that credit card. But what I did was, which is a key thing about this, so you do not have a counterproductive time, is that whenever the money is due at the end of the month, make sure to pay it. So my debit card, my regular account, I was using that and paying it off every month, so I would not get in debt with respect to credit cards. But I was also building a little amount from the cashback that I would get. So I'll use my cashback amount that I accumulated for the month, and then with whatever the difference is, use that to pay it off every month, so I do not get behind it at all. Make sure you pay off your credit card every month, because that's gonna add up. You don't want to get into more debt when you're trying to get out of debt. And so that was what I did. And I wouldn't say everyone should do that, but that was just one of my methods. And I want to be honest and transparent about what I was doing while I was getting out of debt and being in my debt-free journey. So another key thing I must say was, when I started paying off my student loans, I had a good, because it was in July of 2019, and then I finished paying off my student loans on April of 2021. And so a good chunk of time where I started paying off my student loans was pre-COVID, pre-COVID-19, pre-pandemic time. And then of course, COVID-19, there was this huge outbreak and all that stuff. The world kind of got shut down around March of 2020. And so I had this whole system going during that time pre-COVID. However, when COVID happened, I believe several months down the road, there was the pause on student loan payments. And so when that student loan pause happened, it meant you can choose not to keep putting money towards that. And also the student loans were at 0% interest rate. And I made the active decision to keep paying my student loans off. I was like, yeah, I mean, I can pause just as much as the rest of the world did, but I was still getting the same income I was getting monthly. Not much change for me financially, so I did not see any need for me to pause on my payment. And I even saw it as an advantage, because now it's 0% interest. So I was really able to be intentional about paying off all the interest rate amount and also getting into principal and getting a good chunk out of that out. I took that as an advantage to pay off my loans. So, and I know the pause is still on, but I'd highly recommend, do not discontinue paying off your loans if you already are, and because of the debt relief that's going on with pausing due to the pandemic. I recommend, and that helped me so much to be able to really get a good chunk out